Admit that they're engaging in this kind of activity can be legitimately seen as evidence of an illegal conspiracy.
May 31st, 1973. Union Carbide. Internal correspondence. Confidential.
A Union Carbide executive reported to corporate headquarters that if the March letter admitting knowledge of Maltoni's work ever became public, it could be construed as
evidence of an illegal conspiracy by industry if the information were not made public or at least made available to the government.
You kind of avoid as a historian the idea that there are conspiracies or that there are people planning the world in a certain way. You just try to avoid that because it seems too unreal and too frightening in its implications. Yet when you look at these documents, you say, yes, there are people who understood what was going on, people who thought about the crisis that was engulfing them or about to engulf them and tried in every which way to get out of that crisis and actually to, in some sense, suppress an issue.
Do you think all of this added up to use your word, a conspiracy?
In a moral sense, I think it was a conspiracy.
We have learned from the secret archive that when the industry met with NIOSH, it did not mention Maltoni or angiosarcoma.
Union Carbide. Internal correspondence. Confidential. The presentation was extremely well received, and the chances of precipitous action by NIOSH on vinyl chloride were materially lessened. NIOSH did not appear to want to alienate a cooperative industry.
Historians don't like to use, broad political terms like cover-up. But there's really no other term that you can use for this because the industry had the information. They knew the significance of the information that they had, and they refused to tell the government because they were afraid the government would take action that would protect the workforce.
And yet, during this time, Dan Ross and others like him, working in vinyl chloride plants, were being told that there was nothing to worry about, that there's no danger.
That's correct. The industry kept assuring the workforce that there was not anything that they need to be concerned about and that they were going to protect the workforce.
But they didn't.
No, they certainly did not.
The companies involved were among those producing more than 5 billion pounds of vinyl chloride every year, and they were expanding. In 1967, one of them, Conoco, was finishing construction of a new complex in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Dan Ross moved his family into a small house less than a quarter of a mile from the new plant's back door.
He went to work there. He started as a pumper loader, and he moved up fast in the first year that he was there.
He was eager and a hard worker.
He was smart.
He was smart, right.
And a hard worker.
Another early hire at Conoco was Everett Hoffpower, who took the job shortly after he returned from serving in Vietnam.
We were in a startup phase, an early operation phase, and they were getting all the bugs out of it. And we had a lot of releases, and we had a lot of problems. The prevailing attitude of management at the time was, let's get it back online. Downtime is killing us. So as long as it wasn't going to blow something up, go on in there and do what you got to do.
You were breathing it?
You were breathing it, get hired in a Georgia pine sucking on it,
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's very intoxicating. It's a lot like propane or any other light ends. It's aromatic. And like I say, it did give you a buzz if you stayed in it long enough. Their attitude was, if you don't want to do the job, there's four waiting at the gate to take your job. Do it or else. Vietnam was winding down. Had a lot of people that weren't working, or if they were working for a lot less money, and the plant jobs were very attractive. So if you didn't want to do the work, just say so. Somebody'd wait and take your place.
So you'd worry more about your job than about your health.
I had a wife and 3 kids at home I had to feed, Yeah, you worry more about your health. It wasn't I told you it was a real health hazard, just so you didn't worry about it.
But the companies were worried.
December 14th, 1971, Ad Hoc Planning Group for Vinyl Chloride Research.
To counter the damaging information from the European animal studies, the industry commissioned a confidential study of its own workers that it planned to use in its defense.
The need to be able to assure the employees of the industry that management was concerned for and diligent in seeking the information necessary to protect their health. The need to develop data useful in defense of the industry against invalid claims for injury for alleged occupational or community exposure.
They're telling the scientists this is what we want. They're giving them the money to do the research, and the scientists know that in the end, they've got to come up with something that is approximate to what their funders are interested in.
In other words, they were saying to the epidemiologists, the researchers, the scientists, here's the end we want, produce the science to get us there.
That's right. When research is conducted in that way, then where you're trying to protect the industry rather than give the industry the information it needs to protect the workforce and the public, the process of science is absolutely corrupted.
Good science is to design a study that will determine whether or not there is an effect from the exposure to the chemical. And you should design that study with the greatest amount of power, the greatest amount of ability to detect whether or not there is an effect. Therefore, you should study those workers that are most directly exposed and eliminate workers that don't have exposure. That was not done.
Go to the pool of affected workers, not the pool of workers who might be on the margin of the process.
Absolutely. They didn't do that. They included workers in their study that were probably not ever exposed to vinyl chloride.
So if you bring in secretaries and managers or people out driving trucks, you're diluting
Absolutely.
the impact of your study.
Absolutely. And you can't get a true result when you do something like that.
The researchers were restricted to studying employment records and death certificates. They did not interview the workers themselves.
They were, from their perspective, a terrible bind. They wanted the information to know if the workers had suffered any injury as a result of exposure to vinyl chloride. But they didn't want to tell the workers that they might have been exposed to vinyl chloride and that there was a danger in that exposure. So they didn't want to even alert the workers in any form through these surveys that they might have had a problem that they should investigate themselves, that they should consult with their doctors about, that they should be worried about.
The confidential documents reveal other efforts that affected the outcome.
October 15th, 1973, Vinyl Chloride Epidemiological Study, Progress Report. Several companies have indicated that they do not wish their terminated employees to be contacted directly.
If you have workers that have left employment, they may have left because they were sick. They may have left because they had had some reason to leave, and excluding them from the study gives you a very biased result.
This becomes even more complicated when one seeks information from relatives of past employees who have subsequently died. In other words, we need the information, but at what risk?
This is how I think we as historians are looking at it. If you can keep that knowledge secret, if you keep the causes secret, if you can keep the information secret for long enough, workers will die of other things. They'll vanish from the workforce. They'll go on to other places. They'll retire and die of diseases that may or may not be directly linked to the experience in the workplace.
How are lay people like me, citizens, supposed to decide what is good and what is bad science?
That's hard. It's real hard. Science is easy to manipulate.
In the end, the industry got a report that said what it wanted.
Lake Charles, Louisiana, PPG Vista. Study after study has confirmed there is no evidence that vinyl affects human health, not for workers in the